I'm not really much of a Pokemon fan anymore. I played them a lot when I was younger, but I fell out of the series eventually. The last new Pokemon game that I played was Pokemon Sun. There were a variety of reasons that kept me from continuing on. I was tired of the constant unskippable tutorials, the hand-holdy progression, the surface-level writing, the very low difficulty, and the very slow pace of the combat. I sort of call myself a lapsed Pokemon fan. I still sometimes watch YouTube videos about Pokemon, for example, and I sometimes would play randomized Nuzlocke with my friends and things like that. The game you're looking at right now is not an official Pokemon game. This is Pokemon Infinite Fusions. In addition to adding the fusion mechanic, which gives the game an extra layer of strategy and freshens it up, this game solves almost all of my complaints with the official Pokemon games. There's not really any tutorials. The game trusts you to figure out where to go next. The writing is more interesting than the official games. There's a hard mode. There's built-in randomizer features. And it even includes fast forward. There's a whole added side quest system. There's even 2 regions of the Pokemon world to explore, one of which is much changed since the Johto phase of the game takes place before the Generation 2 Pokemon games. I blasted through the Kanto half of this game recently, and I had a great time, because it was the Pokemon game I'd wanted for years. This kind of stuff is why I love Fangames. I'm Juliet Necro, your favorite dorky goth girl. Like many of my videos, I'm drafting this as part of an anxiety spiral, hooray! I hope recording Juliet and editing Juliet are having a better time than I am. Script editing Juliet here, not really. Recording Juliet here, I'm doing slightly better despite having the sniffles. I've always liked fan games a lot. When I was in middle school, I played quite a bit of Super Mario Bros. X, for example. The first fan game I loved was AM2R, though. It should be no surprise to you if you know how absolutely normal I am about Metroid. Nintendo would, eventually, publish their own remake of Return of Samus, which I don't like nearly as much as AM2R. There's also the fact that a fan game was one of the dominoes that resulted in gender happening to me. I saw Bloodborne PSX on Twitter, and I followed Lilith Walther, and then I followed more trans women, and then I was a trans woman. Whoopsie daisy. I know I said in the Lazel video that November's video had nothing to do with gender, but that was me planting yet another jape. Gotcha again, nerd. Anyway, I wanted to take some time today to discuss why I enjoy fan games so much. We might even discover some deeper truths along the way. Chapter 1. An Infinite Energy Awakens. Fan games are an experience like no other for a variety of reasons, but one is that you see ideas here that you would never see in the context of an official game. The footage you're seeing right now is from an enhanced PC remake of Zelda 2 by Hoverbat. It adds multiple options for new music, remixes the quest structure and adds new items, gives you the choice of a bunch of different playable characters, and displays the game in widescreen. There's even more wonderful additions than I've listed here. I bring this up now because if I was a betting girl monster, I'd bet that Zelda 2 is the least likely Zelda game to ever get a remake. It gets largely forgotten in discussions of the broader series, despite the fact that it fucking whips ass. So us Zelda 2 fans are likely going to get left in the lurch if we ever want to see it remade. It's just not something I think Nintendo would ever think to do. That's what this is all about. A lot more goes into a huge company deciding to make a new project aside from just, hey, you know what would be cool? All kinds of arcane math, research, pitching, and cajoling have to be done to convince the people with the money that whatever game is being proposed will make the money they put into it into more money later. I have my doubts about whether anyone attempting to pitch a Zelda 2 remake at Nintendo would get nearly as far with their project as Hoverbat did. For one thing, releasing a game called Zelda 2 in this decade, when there's now 18 mainline Zelda games, would be kinda nuts. One minor way that Zelda 2 is unique in its series is that it's the only one with a number in its title, unless you count Link Between Worlds' Japanese title. So immediately you've hit a snag, because the marketing department is worried people will be confused by the number 2. So you opt to just call the game The Legend of Zelda: The Adventure of Link, and the marketing team gets back to you and says, but aren't most of these games about Link going on an adventure? Then it's back to the drawing board again, assuming you even got to this far in the process in the first place. Maybe this example is a bit hyperbolic and unrealistic, because I haven't been involved in the process of pitching a game, yet. However, there's a reason that the entertainment industry loves safe sequels to familiar intellectual properties. A Zelda 2 remake simply wouldn't be a safe investment, you see. But Hoverbat doesn't see it as an investment. The PC remake of Zelda 2 is just something someone wanted to do, and so they did. Fan games are inherently works not made for profit, since they're made by people who get instantly sued straight into the deepest pit of Tartarus if they attempted to profit from their work. Even if they don't attempt to profit off of that work, it often gets slapped with a cease and desist anyway. Part of the reason I downloaded Zelda 2 Remake as soon as I heard it exists was so that I could have a copy on my hard drive in case the Nintendo ninjas come knocking on Hoverbat's door. AM2R disappeared almost as quickly as it was finished, and I have it as a result of a friend giving me a Google Drive link with it years ago. Thanks, Jordan, if you're watching. You just see wacky stuff more in Fangames, since the creator doesn't have to worry about mass appeal. If Nintendo actually did announce a Zelda 2 remake, the reaction from even most Zelda fans would probably be incredulity. They'd question why Nintendo wasn't remaking their favorite Zelda game, or focusing on creating a new entry. Even if the game was great, it would likely still be stained by that initial introduction, at least in the short term. It's better if it's this way. The Zelda 2 fans get to have their fun thing, without everyone else getting upset that it's not their thing. Art made for a profit always has to calculate how wide of an audience it can capture to justify the expense of producing it. Art made without a profit in mind can be whatever it wants, since it's made for the joy of making it. Its audience can be any size, it just has to find them. Without the limit of working for profit and for the owner of the intellectual property, fan games are free to be more niche, wackier, more experimental than official series entries are usually allowed to be. Me and the other Zelda 2 fans are eating good for once. That's another big part of why fan games are a valuable part of the ecosystem. Chapter 2. Don't cry anymore, because now there is a person looking for you, dying to see you. This is Sonic and the Fallen Star. This is Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit. About a month later, it's already Sonic o'clock once more. Sonic is one of the most prolific franchises in the fan game space. It seems like almost every week some new Sonic fan project appears on the scene and blows everyone's mind. I played these two for this video, but off the top of my head I can think of Sonic Odyssey, Sonic Roboblast 2, Sonic Roboblast Kart, Sonic before the sequel, and Sonic after the sequel. I think there's a lot of reasons that Sonic fan games are so prolific. The Sonic fan base is almost frighteningly passionate for one, but for another, it felt like Sonic games are only coming out sporadically for a while there. There weren't any new Sonic games released between 2017 and 2022, unless you count Olympics and racing spin-offs. All that fan energy has to go somewhere, and in the case of Sonic, it went into a huge variety of fan projects. Despite the gap in releases, I was pretty confident in that time frame that Sonic wasn't going away forever, but there are other game series that I'm less sure about. For example, there hasn't been a new Mega Man game released in 6 years, unless you count whatever that phone game is. I don't think it's a coincidence that Mega Man also has an extremely prolific fan game scene. Capcom will probably deign to make another new Mega Man eventually, but probably never at the rate they used to. And we might never see an X9 or anything more out there like Legends or Battle Network again. There's other games I'm even less sure about. Let's talk about Blood, for example. Blood's rights situation is confusing as hell. Atari owns the publishing rights for the two existing Blood games. The intellectual property is owned by Warner Brothers. I wonder if Warner Brothers is even aware if they own those rights. As much as they love flaunting all the franchises that they own the rights to, they seem to only ever acknowledge the very largest ones, like DC Comics and Lord of the Rings. Make another Matrix game, you assholes. Also, how fucking dare you make a 5th Matrix movie and put cis people in charge of it? Fuck you! Even among DC Comics, they only ever want to make Batman stuff. Plus, as a video game publisher, Warner Brothers is one of the worst there is these days. I don't think there's much of a chance that the money men there will see fit to let Caleb out of his coffin again.
No one wants to play with me.
Once more, this is where fan creativity steps in to blow on the embers of the fire. The footage you're seeing now is from Death Wish by Blowtoid, a full-length mod for Blood that continues the original game's story, and uses all kinds of tricks and traps to expand the scope as well. It's pretty much considered to be what Blood 2 should have been. It's a Doom 2-esque alternative sequel to the original. Death Wish nails the vibe of Blood, and I think it even has better level design than the original in many cases. Even though this is technically a mod and not a fan game, do we really need to make that distinction? Doom 2 is essentially a mod of the first one, and by that logic, most megawads constitute fan games in my view. Blood's not the only example. There's plenty of other fallow franchises whose fires are kept alive by fan creativity. Castlevania, Duke Nukem, and Bloodborne all have really cool fan releases out there. In the spirit of full disclosure, I am contributing screenwriting and playtesting to the Duke Nukem Forever Restoration project. There's even fan games for people who like one game in a series and not the rest. A lot of the large-scale mods for Fallout, for example, try to recapture the spirit of New Vegas as much as possible, out of preference for that game and frustration at Bethesda for not producing another like it. Whether those projects succeeded or failed, I'll let others litigate. My point is that the hearts of the people involved were in the right place. They loved something, and so they started working together to put more of it into the world. These projects make it clear that the rights holders for all these games may own them legally, but they don't own them spiritually. All these games belong just as much to you and me as they do to David Zaslav or whoever the fuck. David Zaslav didn't make Blood. Why does that fucker get to say he owns Caleb? Everything that exists relies on some contribution from someone beforehand. So for a corporation to say, I own this forever, no one can use it, is a bit clownish. Sounds like it's time for a huge swerve straight into left-wing political theory. Chapter 3. I want to have a pure time, everyone's a noble mind. It is indeed time for a huge swerve straight into left-wing political theory. One of the most frustrating and bad arguments I've heard against socialism and in favor of capitalism is the idea that people are motivated to create things and innovate via the profit motive. I'm sure that there really are people who create art because they want money, but if that's the case, they went into the wrong field. It's been a pretty bad decade so far for people who work in the mainstream games industry. Over the past 10 years or so, there was a lot of buying up. Microsoft Katamari'd half of the games industry, amid other mergers and acquisitions. Now, developers at a lot of these studios are getting fucked over. Microsoft is now closing down studios and laying off staff even faster than they acquired them. Insultingly, they're acting like it was so hard for them to cost all these people their jobs. Oh, boo-hoo, woe is me. A bunch of people don't know where next month's rent is coming from, but I had to do the immense emotional labor of telling a subordinate to tell a subordinate to tell the studio they're all fired immediately. In many cases, the executives are pressuring studios to make games nobody wants, then blaming them and shuttering them when they don't sell. Bye-bye, Arcane Austin. Through all of this, the industry's workers are being told that they didn't get into this for the money, they got into it because of their passion for the work. Usually this is part of a pitch to get them to accept unconscionable labor practices like scheduled crunch time. But wait a minute, I thought people created things because of the profit motive. Where did passion come from? If the profit motive argument is already on shaky ground because of hypocrisy, the existence of fan games is a bullet straight through its heart. If it's all about the profit motive, why do people make such incredible games that they can't profit from due to conflict with the rights holders? The answer is, people really do make games because they love to do so, not because they're in it for the money. People love these works of art enough to contribute to their overall story, even if they can't profit from it. They could just as easily create a similar game and sell it, and many do, but it's also a beautiful thing to contribute a game to a series, even unofficially, just out of love for it. There's also the fact that many of these games are the work of multiple people. Once again, the argument from the capitalist goes that people only organize and work together to enrich themselves. But that's not true either. These are people freely associating with one another and working toward a common goal purely because they want to. No profit motive required, and these are people who still live under capitalism. Fan game creators, fan artists, fan musicians, fanfic writers come home from busy days, earning enough to survive and devote their free hours to creation, simply for the joy of doing so. Imagine what kinds of things people would create if food, clothes, and shelter were guaranteed to everyone, and people only worked toward the common good. Peter Kropotkin's answer, in The Conquest of Bread, is that it would lead to an even greater explosion in the fields of arts and science. Is it a dream to conceive a society in which, all having become producers, all having received an education that enables them to cultivate science or art, and all having the leisure to do so, people would combine to publish the works of their choice, by contributing each her share of manual work? We have already hundreds of learned, literary, and other societies, and these societies are nothing but groups of people interested in certain branches of learning, and associating for the purpose of publishing their works. The authors who write for the periodicals of these societies are not paid, and the periodicals are not for sale. They are sent gratis to all quarters of the globe, to other societies cultivating the same branch of learning. Hell yeah, dude. It's time for an intermission. And I wanted to talk to you about something serious, since this is the first time you're hearing me since the election. I won't lie to you and say that the near future is going to be a lot of fun. It's not going to be. However, it is imperative that you stay with us, that you don't detransition, and that you get involved. You need to be out there doing something. Go to a protest. Feed the homeless. Look after the members of your community. You're not going to solve this by bed rotting as much as, take some time to bed rot, but you can't bed rot forever. You're gonna have to go outside, and you're gonna have to build a movement. We're going to have to build a movement. I'm going to keep doing this. This is not the only thing I'm going to do, but I'll leave that offline. There's an old socialist song that I love called Bread and Roses. The lyric is, "It's bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too." Consider these videos to be my roses that I'm giving to you, while you go out and fight for bread. The feeling that we have to adopt in these times is hope against all odds that a better world is possible. I'd like to recommend this video by Elliot Sang about the idea of ominous positivity. This idea that, you know, nothing lasts forever, so we will outlast this, okay? Take care of yourselves. Now, let's get into some media recommendations, a little bit later. So, your movie recommendation for today is Sherlock Jr., starring Buster Keaton. I've been getting way more into Buster Keaton stuff lately because it is so much fun. He's such a brilliant stunt performer, and his movies are so funny. And this one's a great introduction. It's like 40 minutes long. It's got some great stunts in it and great comedy. I think you really enjoy it. Even if you've never watched a silent movie before, give this one a spin. And your game recommendation for today is Fallen Leaves, which is a mod for Doom 2. It's about 7 maps, I think, like small slaughter maps, micro slaughter. And it has a very beautiful fall-themed color palette, so it's like a perfect thing to play here in sort of the waning days of fall. I think if I can, I'm going to try and release this video on Thanksgiving Day. We'll see if I make it. Yeah, give those a spin. I think that just watch a Buster Keaton movie. It'll make you feel better, I promise. Then, back to the video. Chapter 4. So that we may forge our own path. You might have thought the fact that all of this video's chapter titles are lyrics or quotes from Gundam, and had screenshots from Zeta Gundam and Char's counterattack was a non sequitur. Nothing is ever a non sequitur on the Juliet Necro channel. I'm always going somewhere with it. You might have surmised from the fact that I made Char Aznable jokes in both the Lazel and Sonic videos that I'm in a Gundamish phase of my life right now. I've had my fill of the Universal Century after watching 79, Zeta, and Char's counterattack. So now I'm watching Witch from Mercury. If you're one of my friends and you're watching this video, I'm sorry that all I ever yap about anymore is Camille Beaton and Char Aznable. It will happen again, and I actually lied when I said I was sorry. Thinking a lot about fan creativity is inspiring to me, as I've discussed. If I'm way into a piece of art, I'm always making jokes or creating theories or imagining stories that happen on the margins outside of what's depicted on screen or on page. For instance, I started Zeta Gundam, and I saw Camille Beaton and I said, immediately, she's a baby trans girl. As I continued to watch the show, more evidence mounted that I was correct. By the end, I was so convinced that I started getting upset at the show's subtitles for misgendering her. Eventually, I also became a Char transfem truther, for reasons I won't elaborate on here. I spent a lot of time imagining what kind of sad mother-daughter relationship the two of them must have off-screen. I realized recently that I've basically been writing fanfiction, but I've been sending it in microscopic chunks and Discord messages to my friends, rather than composing it properly and posting it for people to read. I've never been much of a fanfic reader. The only fanfic I ever really got invested in was one where Edward Elric underwent shenanigans that resulted in him becoming a woman, and then she dated Roy Mustang. Then I filed that away in my brain and did nothing with it for 10 years. Oopsie daisy. I'm doing my best to put a little bit of my own fan creativity into the world. Part of the reason I want to dip my toe into fanfic writing is because I want to dip my toe into fiction writing in general. It's always something I wanted to do, and I'm finally gaining the confidence to try. I've been hesitant to start original fiction in the past. I've paralyzed myself by thinking that everything has to be laid out absolutely perfectly, that I have to have the most world building ever, that I have to have an answer to every possible question. I wanted to have the most banger idea possible, but the problem is, even if I found it, I wasn't confident that my chops would be strong enough to do it justice. Part of the reason I want to write fanfic is I just want to create stories in these settings. I had a persistent daydream a few months ago about being given free rein to make a TV series set in the universe of the Alien films, and imagining what I would do with that. The chances of me actually getting to make that TV show is infinitesimally small. I can rework some of those ideas into a piece of fiction, though. Of course, I'm also writing that transfem Char and Camille thing. That one's going to be at least 17 chapters and go all the way through Char's counterattack. If I've done this like I planned, there should be a chapter of the Char story and the Alien story available at the time of this video's release. If so, links will be in the description. I'm happy to contribute to these works of art, even in my little way. I appreciate the chance to learn new skills and grow as a writer in a safer environment. And I'm happy to know that projects like the ones I've shown off in this video can exist. A lot more people contribute to the tapestry than the corpos who own the IP rights to little pieces of it. Someday, all of it will belong to all of us. Thanks for watching.